tomorrow is the final day for all ANC branch general meetings to nominate top 6 officials as well as additional members ahead of the party's 55th National Conference. Now, the Free State and the Western Cape have not been able to do or go to their provincial conferences, with the Free State only having had 44% of its BGMs already gone to conference. And Ziyanda Ngcobo is here in studio to put all of that in plain language for us. Good morning to you. Let's pick up with the latest news that's come up. We'll talk about the nominations process. The National Youth League Task Team.
Yes.
That's the interim structure of what used to be known as the ANC Youth League.
100%.
They have come out with their nomination, and they've put at the top of their list Zweli Mkhize for president and deputy Paul Mashatile. How's that going down in the political world?
Well, I don't know why you're laughing, but it would seem, I think, the fact that there aren't any leagues, elected leadership in the leagues, in particular the Youth League and the Women's League, that is, superseding most of the discussions this morning, in particular because the discussion around this is why then they've only nominated one woman in the entire top 6, a youth structure that hasn't also considered the generational mix, because you have Dr. Zweli Mkhize for president, Paul Mashatile for deputy, which means it snubbed its own former deputy president, Ronald Lamola, to become deputy president. Wow. And then you only have Nomvula Mokonyane elected to become deputy secretary general, Fikile Mbalula to become secretary general. So where is that generational mix? At best then, it would have Fikile Mbalula representing a certain generation of that youth league, but where are the women in that structure? So that's part of the discussion that's taking place this morning. But also, Koli, what is also a discussion is how much weight this will have, because it is a task team going into that conference. I think at best, in terms of the youth representation, it will be 10 delegates. But it's important to remember that a lot of, these youth league task team members are also have now become branch executive or branch secretaries or BEC members, who would be delegates at that conference. So maybe not under the banner of the youth league per se, but they would be represented. So this means clearly this is a boost also for Dr. Zweli Mkhize's presidential bid. Indeed it is. Someone said earlier, talking about the influence of the Youth League, or at least what was the Youth League then, that the last time it had any influence on ANC conferences was in Polokwane. So we are wait and see just how much weight they have then. So let's go back to the branch nomination process. It's been pushed and pushed down the line, so many instances that tomorrow we may be told, yes, indeed, it is the final day, but perhaps we're going to extend yet again. What seems to be the problem with these BGMs? And I ask that on the back of the fact that the provinces of the ANC, some have been disbanded because they have reached their lifespan. Some are simply dysfunctional. Is that where the problem is, the dysfunction? Well, yes, and yes, to a large extent, Koli. You'll remember that in the Free State, they still haven't had their provincial elective conference. But I wouldn't necessarily use the word dysfunction, but definitely not as well-oiled and as organized as you would have had in a previous conference, where you would have already known the elected leadership of the different provinces. A lot of the leadership of the different various provinces are new. Limpopo, they only went to conference in June. KwaZulu-Natal only went to conference in July. The Northwest only also recently went to conference. So these are all new leaders. So this is why this jostling has become quite interesting, because it's not quite clear who's backing who. You'd sort of know that Ngcobo Ngambi is aligned to Ziyanda Ngcobo, whereas it's not necessarily that easy. And this permeates all the way down to the branches. And a big issue has been around verification. So there's this new system, of course, to do the audits and to be able to verify the various members. So this has been an issue, and where you've seen in some instances in provinces such as KZN and Mpumalanga, where Mpumalanga was the kingmaker, it was second going into the 54th National Conference. I think they're only now 5th, because a lot of the branches have been slashed in terms of their numbers. So this is where things sit. But last week you would have heard Bulemabe saying that the 70% threshold that's needed to go to conference has been met. So I don't anticipate then an extension of that particular deadline. The Electoral Commission, in fact, is expected to pronounce at some stage either this week or next week once they tally up, and then we'll start getting a clearer picture of what the various provinces have been saying about the leadership race, not only the top 6, but the NEC. I'm mentioning that because there's another layer to this process that's never been seen before, Kole. That's the request by the Electoral Commission, led by Kgalema Motlanthe, that there be a declaration of the donations made to the various campaigns for NEC members and the top 6, who the campaign managers are, and that there be a spreadsheet of the income and the expenses of the various campaigns. That notice came out last week. So that is a layer that is going to also, I guess, create an interesting element.
Wow. Talking about these rules that have come from the ANC Electoral Committee, that is led by the former President Kgalema Motlanthe. Last week, you had that interesting conversation with Dr. Nkosazana Zuma, and there does seem to be a mention that there are campaign rules where you're not supposed to say bad things about a fellow contender.
Yes.
Well, she did, in a way, say that I don't have any documents locked away somewhere. I don't know whether that would be considered as a swipe at President Ramaphosa. Look, let's discuss this whole matter around what I call dysfunction, but you're saying that it's perhaps not a well-oiled machine as far as handling the ANC's structures in the lead-up to this conference. Does this have, at least in part, to do with the fact that the party at the moment does not have a Secretary General? It has a coordinator in that office, and it has Paul Mashatile, who acts as Secretary General. And how big a hand has he played, seeing that his name seems to be coming up very prominently for this position of Deputy President? Might it be alleged that he has used that office in order to prop up his campaign?
So that's an allegation that's already been made against Paul Mashatile in terms of him leveraging the position that he's been in insofar as interfacing directly with the branches and the leadership of various provinces and overseeing, like I mentioned, the various conferences that have taken place over the last couple of months in the various provinces. How do you prove that per se? Maybe, yes, there are murmurs that behind closed doors he has been negotiating for himself. That's why whether you look in the Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, Gauteng, Limpopo, Paul Mashatile is a name that is landing quite well. Now, this morning, we also heard that the ANC Youth League task team has also endorsed him. But certainly, it's the first time, I think, I stand to be corrected, that the ANC goes into a conference without a sitting SG and DSG. So, you know, the passing away of Jesse Duarte also added a layer of, paralysis in that SGO, and that also cannot be underestimated. But I think the entire discussion also is about how there are some who feel, as if you saw the Sunday Times article, that this is the weakest NEC that's ever existed, according to Nomvula Mokonyane. And, that question that I posed to Dr. Nkosazana Zuma was also to say, but you're part of the collective. So it's very interesting that you have these NEC members that are slating perhaps the leadership of President Ramaphosa in a roundabout way, but you also form part of the collective. So what's going to change? Is it the culture? Is it human beings that are there? Can you really say that a change in leadership is going to take the country forward? And do South Africans even believe that this is still possible?
What happens to brand ANC? We shall see.
Yeah.
We are all going to be covering this conference. Ziyanda Ngcobo, thank you very much for putting that plainly for us. She watches politics very closely.